If you never, ever, ever narrate or express that you are human and going through something to the kids will think that what's going on is their fault. They will think that they're responsible. An idea about cynicism, or a way of thinking about cynicism, is 100% surety that everything is going to turn out terrible. Everything is going to be bad. There's nothing to be done. If I 100% know that all of my efforts are for naught, I don't need to do anything. It is moving us toward learned helplessness.
I've been really thinking about this duality of cynicism and curiosity, and really how curiosity can be the flip side of cynicism.
Curiosity as an antidote. Asking more questions, wondering. I do a lot of work in the context of trauma-informed care, and one of the biggest pieces within trauma-informed care is we don't ask what is wrong with the student, we ask what has happened. So it's curious.
We live in a culture where people want change overnight. Here's the 5 steps to transforming your life, finding the partner of your dream. And one of the things that I focus so much on is the 1 degree shifts, right? If I'm the captain of the ship, I'm moving 1 degree, and how over time, that's going to completely shift my trajectory in where I'm going on my journey.
What advice do you have for educators to have more of a sustainable approach to teaching, to be able to show up with more curiosity?
First, you have to know how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pause here. Not everybody knows how they're feeling.
Hey, Allison. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be in conversation with you both.
We are so excited to talk to you today. I know you've been talking a lot recently about curiosity, and really how curiosity can be the flip side of cynicism, especially in education. That feels very ripe to me. And because I love to start in the muck, right? Let's start with cynicism and get into all the fun, light stuff right away. And just to give maybe a quick personal anecdote, because I've been really thinking about this duality of cynicism and curiosity. Like when I was in the classroom, I remember my first year teaching middle school, just leaning into cynicism. I don't know, by winter break, by Thanksgiving time, I was fully cynical, right? And a lot of that was just a protective mechanism from feeling all the feels and from just feeling overwhelmed and anxious and burned out that first year, as many first year teachers do, right? But it's really interesting to me to just think about the impact that cynicism had and how we can move to that. And I know you've been thinking about this a lot. So tell us, right? What do you mean by cynicism? How do you make sense of that? And I'd love to just hear you explore it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, in part because I think myself and many other folks have been feeling it a lot. Feeling it in whether if we're in the classroom or just what our world is like. And so I ended up kind of going on a journey of nerding out, going to the kind of science of it, and really relying a lot upon Jamil Zaki's work and a book that he has called Hope for Cynics. So within that, and as some of the kind of research around it, an idea about cynicism, or a way of thinking about cynicism, is 100% surety that everything is going to turn out terrible.
Mm.
It is the knowledge that everything is going to be bad. It can actually be articulated as the opposite side of the coin of optimism, which is the 100% surety that everything's going to be fine. And that's a little bit of a provocation to kind of think about it in that way. And I actually appreciate the provocation and the nuance, which is that both of those things, optimism in this kind of definition and cynicism, require no work on your part.
Say more about that.
What are you going to do? If I 100% know that all of my efforts are for naught, I don't need to do anything. Also, if I'm 100% sure that my efforts are going to come out perfectly, I don't need to do anything. So it's actually something that really takes away our agency and our ability to do something about it. It is moving us toward learned helplessness. It is moving us towards deactivation. It is moving us towards not doing anything. And I think there's a way that we can kind of frame and think about cynicism as being something. Well, first of all, it's not a trait. It's not something inherent in a person. It actually comes up due to circumstances. So Sam, you talked about, and I would can imagine, but would love to kind of know, what were the things that got you really cynical in that year? Was it that your techniques weren't working out? Was it that the workload was way hard? What was it that, there were probably things that were outside of you that really contributed to it. And then I'll also just kind of say that we live in an environment that is really moving us way faster towards cynicism.
And to quickly answer that, right? And I know a lot of our educators struggle with this. It was classroom management. I would spend hours lesson planning, preparing really cool stuff that never happened, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instead of, a marker was thrown at Mr. Levine's head, right? Like, as a lot of educators face, especially in today's context, with so much going on politically, economically, in school environments, with cuts to programs and other things like that. So, yeah, I mean, what I hear you, and that's where I was. That's what was underneath it. What am I supposed to do about that?
First things first, one of which is to kind of think and kind of like, I come from a place around both in my therapeutic kind of perspectives and clinical perspectives that awareness really helps. It's not everything, but awareness really helps. So one of which is to be aware. And you frame this, Sam, like imagine that you were in that classroom and you actually had teaching aides in the classroom. That the kid who was really trying to manage their own behavioral dysregulation was getting enough support to be able to be in the classroom. What if there were enough materials? First of all, is to kind of think about this as not necessarily, the only things that I'm in control of, but the system and what system is kind of there, right? So there's that. But then you can be like, well, fine, the system's terrible. What am I going to do? We do have to think about what are the small things that are within our locus control that we can do. But cynicism, and you talked about this, is a defense that we really can empathize with. And so there's an analogy that it is a suit of armor that's to protect us from all this terrible stuff that's kind of going on, but it's a suit of armor that will drown us. It doesn't really protect us, or it's a poison pill because it really takes away our agency, our sense of that we can move to something. It's been linked to cardiovascular risks, depression, it's been linked to worse behavior. Actually, folks that have more cynical views treat other people more negatively, which causes people to be more negative. It's a cycle.
Can I say something about that? Because I remember when I was in the classroom and, kids would come into class and completely dysregulated, hitting other kids, screaming, and I had no idea what was going on. And then and I would just become so reactive, literally like showing up the way they were showing up. It was like later on, I realized mirror neurons in your brain are like literally causing that. Like when I show up in a certain way or when someone else shows up to me in a certain way, that actually impacts, it's reciprocal. So I got that later, but I didn't know that at the time. And so I would start to feel literally frustrated, upset, pissed off, whatever the way they were showing up. And I was like, who am I? Who am I literally even becoming? And I remember being horizontal on my couch, literally every day. My roommates who were also teachers coming home, being just as stressed as I was. We'd cry together, literally. I was 2 months into the year, wondering if I'm going to finish the year. And I know that so many educators experience this because, we're not just teaching content. We're mental health professionals. We're nurses. We're caregivers. We're, supporting all not just our students, but everyone in the ecosystem that is education. And I was like, this is so unsustainable. And I'm not even teaching effectively. What? I came here because I love teaching. I want to be in it in this profession for life. It's so important. The passion was there, but slowly dying because the cynicism was so real for me. I remember this moment where I started to play with, what if I just tried to be a little more curious about what was going on inside me? And then what's going on inside my students that's having them right? And it completely transformed the way I showed up and the way that my students started to experience school. And I know that you've become obsessed with curiosity, and it's kind of another anecdote to cynicism. So I would love for you to kind of talk about your new obsession with curiosity and how you think that might shift this stuckness that we get in cynicism.
Yeah, I mean, holding a lot of empathy for the ways in which we get really propelled so quickly towards cynicism. And then, as you're talking about, to burnout, right? And to frustration, and to then act in the ways that we don't want to. We didn't become teachers to, be that frustrated or to do that. So, one way of kind of thinking about it is curiosity as an antidote. And to think about really curiosity as asking more questions, wondering, and actually having a little bit of space from that surety of cynicism to be like, well, I wonder. And in fact, there's another way for us to kind of think about it. Jamil Zaki talks about as hopeful skepticism. He and others kind of define hope, and psychology kind of defines hope not just as like, gee, things will work out well, but actually having a goal and a plan. Right. And there's this wonderful quote from Rebecca Solnit that's hope is not a lottery ticket that you sit on the couch with. It is an axe that you knock down the door with. Somewhat like that. The idea about action, right? So action, and also skepticism, which is also skeptical, means, I don't really think so, but maybe. It's a little tiny bit of a space. So if we think about those kinds of constructs underneath curiosity, it's like you're kind of talking about that spark with like, I wonder. And also in our context of teaching, let me try this. Let me try this.
And I might still be like this, right?
Yeah.
I might be like, this sucks,
This didn't work.
This is not working. And,
Yeah.
It's like that little shift is like, that changes the game, which is really interesting.
And it's about it's slowing down and having a little bit more space. And you mentioned something that's really important. Can we get curious about our students? So I do a lot of work in the context of trauma-informed care. And one of the biggest pieces within trauma-informed care is we don't ask what is wrong with the student. We ask what has happened. So it's curious. I wonder what happened. I wonder what we can do. I wonder if this changed. But, and the tension that we have is that there's so many things that stop us from being curious and stop us from having that space. So what can we do to kind of open up kind of curiosity within ourselves? One, I'm always going to point to the system issues. If we actually had enough funding and support and valued kids in our society, we wouldn't be in this kind of space. So there's that. Then also we can get to the kind of, so maybe I'll choose to advocate or, vote in a particular way. There's all these other kinds of things. But when we get in terms of what I can do in this kind of moment, can I take a breath and can I ask myself a question? Can I work on my own kind of regulation in this moment? Can I be supportive of actually helping kids to kind of regulate? Can I create a classroom that is a curious classroom where we're not afraid to ask each other kinds of questions? We're aware that sometimes our questions bump on each other, but can we be open to kind of try it on? So small, tiny things that develop a muscle of kind of curiosity might be able to help. And what we find is that it actually helps us feel better. When we're so convinced that everything's going to turn out terribly, it means we no longer have agency to do anything about it. So, yeah.
I feel like one of the things that we live in a culture where people want change overnight. Here's the 5 steps to transforming your life, finding the partner of your dreams, right? Like all those kinds of things. And I feel like Ilana and I, and you, Allison, right, educators and entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I focus so much on in the entrepreneurship side is the 1 degree shifts, right? If I'm the captain of the ship, I'm moving 1 degree, and how over time that's going to completely shift my trajectory in where I'm going on my journey. And to me, that's what you're talking about here. It's not that you're going to shift the culture of your classroom or your community overnight by showing up more curiously. That's unlikely to happen.
Yeah.
And if you stick with it and you show up that way, what I'm hearing you say is over time that can drive those 1 degree shifts that really add up.
And hopefully it's just something that'll make you feel better, right? It is just the idea that I can keep on trying or I can try something else. And if we really spend time, I spend a lot of time trying to work and support educators, there's something that has worked. There's something that has worked for that kid on that day or for you in this kind of space. Can we pay attention to that? Sometimes we're so overwhelmed with all of the ways that things aren't working out. But sometimes we just got to focus in on like, okay, that one day, that exercise did really work or that kind of reframe really worked. And that is about kind of being hopeful and purposeful, right? I've got a plan and I'm going to keep on trying on it.
One thing that you said a few moments ago is you were talking about just like taking a pause and taking a breath. And I think when, at least for me, when I think about the context of our education system, so much of education is focused on cognitive intelligence. like the thinking, multiple choice tests, assessments, like getting the right answer. There's one way, and it's like, this is the trajectory, which like there's no space for curiosity there. If there's like one approach, one answer, like where is there room for questioning? And so, the fact that you started to bring up these other sort of layers of intelligence, like, Allison, you're working with us to create our human intelligence framework at Breathe for Change. And cognitive intelligence absolutely is one layer of intelligence. And when it comes to curiosity, it might be like critical thinking and all of those things in the mind. But then we've got these other layers, and you just spoke to somatic intelligence, right? Our intelligence of the body, like awareness of what's happening inside me. Can I respond to that by like taking a deep breath, regulating myself? And then there's also like emotional intelligence, which you are an absolute expert in. And we're going to go deeper on that with you today. It's like being aware of how I'm feeling inside, right? And then attuning to that, and then being able to give yourself what you need and do that emotional regulation, which, talk about classroom management, like huge issue. Like that is emotional regulation. We don't teach those skills in schools. Why? Makes no sense. And then there's also like the social intelligence and our connection to being able to relate to others and cultivate a sense of belonging. And then what we refer to as universal intelligence, our connection to our greater purpose, something bigger than ourselves. And so I just love, like, even the way you talked about curiosity, it seemed like as an expanded definition of what people are talking about in schools. And so I'm curious, given that emotional intelligence is like, we're talking to the expert here, if you could go a little bit more deeply about like the connection between engaging in like exploration, curiosity, and what emotional intelligence, bridge that for us.
I love the way that you're actually bringing these all into relationship. And that, I think, is the piece, right? We have, as I understand it, an overemphasis on one particular type of intelligence within our educational system, which is a focus on demonstrating and doing things within the cognitive. But we do that overemphasis and forgetting that the other pieces are there, right? And that what will shut down, if we still focus on cognition, if that's still the thing that's most important, then we need to think about actually what gets in the way of that, right? So what shuts down our ability to engage as critical thinkers is not being able to regulate, is fear, is uncertainty, is transitions, is that I have a social interaction that isn't going well. So it's the interaction of all of these that is important. So I think about it because sometimes I have to speak the language of prioritizing cognition, because that's the audience.
We all do.
Right?
Yep.
So that's the audience. But it's also a frame of like, yeah, you really don't get to learn how to read if you don't have your basic needs met, if you're not in relationship, and if every time you read something that's, overwhelming or scary, you flood. So we've got to be in relationship with all these kinds of pieces, right? And then it's also our opportunity, because it's what we ironically ask teachers to do all the time. So get all this cognitive stuff, but have good relationships with the kids, help them out when they've got big feelings, help them move through their space in a particular way. And then also, you better be well too. It's the task of the educator to actually tend to all of those. So I really appreciate, and thus, the benefits of the work that you all do is to actually say, oh, no, there's more than just one. And it's more than, just one and social emotional learning. It's like we're embodied people. We actually have a breath and a butt. And it's more than just me. It's our collective pieces. And this also has to sit in the larger kind of piece around purpose and connection. So for what, right? To learning for what? And we've actually, and I won't go too far off this, but I spent a lot of time in higher ed. What we've done in kind of college and beyond is we've said, and we've organized folks to move towards transactional learning. You better get the A so that you can get to this thing, so that you can get a job, so you can get more money. That track, right? And even in the space we were saying, okay, college isn't the only way. We actually just sub out the kind of same transactional language. Great, you can move into the trades, the transactional, so you can make more money. We haven't organized it around kind of purpose, and I think we've back-ended. Long way of kind of saying, an overemphasis on the cognitive without understanding that we have all of these pieces that are mutual isn't going to work for us. And it's showing up in terms of lack of engagement, loneliness, lack of purpose, crisis of meaning. So I think for us to begin really early, attending to some of this might help, hopefully.
Agree deeply. And that's why we're doing this. This is why we're really thinking about how education needs to evolve to focus in on other layers of intelligence, like the emotional side, like the universal layer has so much to do with purpose, right? That leads to more engagement. And right leads to higher academic performance over time because of everything that you're mentioning. I'm curious. I want to go back to curiosity and emotional intelligence for a minute. Like, Allison, I have 3 kids, 4 and under. Right? I'm in it. I'm in
Yes.
it.
I almost have 3 kids, 4 and under, 2 kids, 4 and under.
That's still a lot.
We're in it. And one thing that I notice every day is just how my emotional state is impacting my children, which has everything to do with co-regulation. And that's happening in classrooms every single day around the country and world. And I'm curious if you could tie the curiosity piece to co-regulation in particular. It feels so important. Ilana and I have spent, I don't know, 1,000 hours over the last few months,
Multiple thousands of hours, yeah.
digging in on co-regulation and emotional intelligence. And yeah, I think I'm realizing how I, as an educator, shows up just endlessly important to what happens in my classroom, in my context, and tie that to curiosity for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also the kind of space of understanding that curiosity, is about wanting to know more, right? Wanting to know that there are gaps in our kind of knowledge or experience. And so we can think about curiosity in the context of our relationships. It's not just, I want to know more about this fact, but I want to know more about the people that I'm in relationship with. And that is what's happening for kids as they're developing. Kids, we often think about kids being really curious, asking questions. They are, I want to know more beings, right? That's what they really are. And so they're also looking to us, even without our questions or their questions, to the people that are most proximate to help them learn. So they are fundamentally curious about us, the people who spend the time with them. They want to know us or understand us in that way. So I think it's also about, so that's why if their mechanism of learning is through relationships and through seeing and understanding the world around them and through trying it on, they're really curious about how we do it. And actually, we're teaching them. The big asterisk here, the big caveat is that sometimes with that kind of awareness that how we show up and that kind of presence comes, and I see this so often with the parents I work with, and this wasn't true 30 years ago, but it's more present now, is the sense that, oh, then I have to be perfect.
Right.
Then I have to be stable and well and perfect. And we've actually had a whole system that has really kind of commodified that sense, has really organized that. And we've missed the point that actually our own kind of resilience, our kind of falling apart and then recovering is a place that the kids are curious about. And if we only show up as shiny, happy people, we don't teach them that. So just the kind of piece around the curiosity is about when mama's mad, how does she stop being mad? When she falls down, what she can do. I'm sure you all are seeing this all the time.
It's connecting me to, we have 5 competencies per layer of intelligence. And with emotional, which we've been developing with you, that final competency is wholeness, which is how can I have an empowering relationship with every single one of my emotions? Every emotion, anger, sadness, fear, joy, right? And so it's not oh, you have to be happy and joyful all the time, and then we can't show any signs of frustration. That's not allowed. It's actually, how do we welcome it all and bring our awareness to it so that ultimately we have the power to understand what's happening so that we can choose if we want to shift into another state. And I love that. You're reminding me of when I was teaching, or actually in my dissertation work, I was teaching and doing my PhD research. I was following teachers into their classrooms, and Marissa, one of my teachers, would say, "Oh, when I am stressed, my students are stressed. And then Krista was like, when I am calm and collected, my students are calm and collected. But until I asked them the question of like, I just like, how are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, I'm stressed, overwhelmed. And until I asked them like, what's happening inside you? What's the impact on your students? They didn't make the connection between how they showed up and how their students were showing up and vice versa. And I think that's where like the power of teaching co-regulation explicitly can be so transformational, because then they became aware of it. Oh, when I'm stressed, my students are stressed. So I should probably like work on my stress.
Yeah.
And there were shifts in their teaching.
So let's get a little provocative just for a minute. Just curious about where you go. Right? Like when I heard you just, when mama falls down, how does she get back up? Like you're talking about resilience there. What a beautiful thing to teach a child, right? I'm curious where you draw the line in what you share with your students. Let's go classrooms and educational context for a minute, right? Where you want to be honest, right? I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry, whatever it is, right? And you want to tread cautiously because, well, you're the educator and they're your students, and there's just dynamics there that are really, really important. There's child development there that's really important to honor. How do you honor? Like, where do you find the bridge? Where's the line, Allison? Like, how do you find that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that I would kind of invoke is that all of that is such a sophisticated metacognitive process. First, you have to know how you're feeling. Mm-hmm. Let's pause here. Not everybody knows how they're feeling, right? So that's also the skills that we're trying to. 2, you have to know or think or hypothesize about why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. 3, you then got to think about what can I do to feel better in this kind of moment, or how do I kind of manage that? Then you have to do all of that and do that in relationship with the kids. So are you with a group of 2-year-olds, a group of 16-year-olds? Have you known them for 1 second? Have you known them for a long time? There's all these kinds of pieces, right? What would it mean to offer and hold about how you're really doing here? I definitely see folks go the too far, and they use the kids as a means of processing everything. The idea, though, is there's a testing, right? You might be, coming in and say, I'm having a really hard time today, and find that that's really dysregulating for the kids, and it didn't work. Okay. Next day I'll come back and I won't say it in a different way. So I don't know that there's a bright line. I think there's a practice of kind of testing it out. And I do want to kind of caution the swings, right? Because the other thing that will happen is if you never, ever, ever narrate or express that you are human and going through something to the kids will think that what's going on is their fault. They will think that they're responsible. I made Mr. Levine mad again. Right? I always piss them because they're egocentric. They're going to assume it's that, right? And if you go the other way, then it's too much information for them to take. But there is a middle ground that you can kind of calibrate to. But in the absence of information, kids are going to come up with stories. The first story they're going to come up with is that it's their fault. And the other one they're going to come up, they'll make up something else, right? And that actually is really kind of confusing and doesn't really help what's going on. So then we can practice saying, small, short things, right? Which is like, today is a day that's a little bit harder for me, but here's what I'm going to do. Oh, a lot of things are going on this weekend, but here's how I'm going to show up. We can do short little things, and that's something that we can use for, littles all the way up, is some sort of piece. But you also have to have enough spaciousness, and I don't think that we provide enough space for teachers or for people to just be like, let me think a minute. How am I showing up? But you all have been in the classroom and probably have a sense of that line in much brighter ways than I do. But that's the way that I kind of think about it.
You gave me chills there when you I remember a student, talk about feeling bad, right? But who came up to me one day, big behavioral instances, lots of outbursts, a lot of trauma in his history, right? But I remember I can place myself, him saying, Mr. Levine, right? I think that you think that I'm a bad kid.
Yep.
It's like broke my heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's everything to do with what you're talking about, right? Because of how I didn't share how I was doing with him. I would just get angry and authoritative and disciplined, and I was doing my best. And right, that knowledge that he was creating that story and then perpetuating that story. Well, I'm a bad kid. I'm going to show up as a bad kid because I'm going to attention seek now. And I imagine so many of our educators listening to this podcast can resonate with that.
Yeah, despite our intention, despite wanting to kind of create places where kids know that they are loved, the stories that they are responsible for everything and that they are bad are very, very heavy and very present. I don't know if you've all seen the wonderful book called The Bad Seed, right? The Bad Seed and the Good Egg. I love those, and there's thousands of others, but it gives a space for kids to understand that that's a story that's being told, or that there's, that little bit of distance around that's who they are. But it takes a lot to do that. But that story is really, we should assume in many ways that is the automatic story that many kids are getting. Then we can't do it, they're bad.
I mean, I remember in second grade, I'll never forget this. In math, we had like low math, average math. They tracked us in the high math. And Mrs. Carlton was the high math teacher. She was not the kindest teacher. I'm definitely probably the worst teacher I've ever experienced in my life. But I'll never forget. I'm maybe 7, 8 years old, probably 7 because it's the beginning of second grade. I think we took like one worksheet worth of an assessment to determine what class we were in. And all my friends went to the advanced class, and I was placed in the middle class. And I went up to her and I said, like, I really think that I can be in that class. And she's like, you're not smart enough. That's for the most advanced kids.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that. Like, I literally like cried, and then I didn't fight back, because that was like, it was like, how can you fight that? So I just told myself, my story was, I'm not good enough. And it's driving me to this day. It's like the limiting belief that I have about myself, that I have so much more awareness now because I've done this work, but it still catches me on a day-to-day basis. And it's like, oh, so like for me, I know from I'm not good enough, it's like, what did I do? I performed. I outperformed everybody. I became like the class president of elementary school, like 3-sport athlete, homecoming queen, like crushed over 4.0 and everything. Got my PhD before 30, started Breathe for Change. Like, but underneath that is this like, I'm not good enough. It's not like I'm doing this from this place of wholeness. I'm doing it because I literally am like trying to catch up and outperform and like prove I'm okay, everybody. And it's like that one sentence she said to me, I think if she had said like, oh, you think you can do that? I would love to support you in that. Let's try. That could have changed the trajectory of how I show up for myself every day of my life. So it's just interesting to think about how powerful our words are as educators. Every conversation we
and how
have.
much we convey that sense about whether or not we believe in the kids anyway. There's all of this kind of piece. Those words were so heavy and so consequential, and kids are trying to make sense of the behavior all the time. So, Sam, you brought up the kids. I think that you think, which by the way is a big cognitive leap. Right? So I think that you think that I'm bad. Kids are doing that type of testing and assessment all the time, right? And they're trying to make sense of the world kind of around them with an egocentric kind of focus without enough kind of information. And it gets showed up in our expectations, right? So that kind of tracking demonstrates our expectations explicitly. I don't think you can do this. Right. So hopefully we've moved into a place with more growth mindset kind of opportunities, learning. I see things that are happening in education now that didn't happen before. So I have 3 kids. 2 of them are 15 and 17. They have been in multiple school environments where the idea is that you keep on turning in the paper until you get the A. Mm-hmm. It's a growth mindset. Mm. It's until you demonstrate mastery. That's really different than you either get it or you don't.
How has that impacted them?
They have a sense that they can keep on trying, right? And so they have a sense that they keep on trying. They also have a sense that, I'm an old person. I'm a Gen Xer who is like, that's not how we did it. Is there going to be some sort of test that you don't get to kind of, try redo, right? And I mean, life isn't about redos, but then maybe it is, right? So I think they have a general sense that they can put in effort and try. But it also means that implicitly for them, there is a sense that there's an opportunity for them to achieve no matter what. There isn't a barrier to it. It's their choice. I can resubmit it or I cannot. Right. And so that's something that's different. than other educational kind of opportunities that we might have. And that's an expectation that's conveyed. And that's one of the things that we can kind of do within the classroom. My 8-year-old, I was doing something and I like, oh man, I made this mistake. And she goes, did you make a mistake, Mama? I'm like, yeah. She goes, congratulations, you're a human. I was like, oh,
Giving mama permission to be human.
right. I'm like, well, tell me a little bit more about how you came to that understanding. She's like, well, that's what Miss December says in our classroom. Made a mistake? Congratulations, you're human. That kind of common humanity kind of piece. And so here we start talking about self-compassion, right? And that as a skill of developing kind of self-compassion, which is I made a mistake and I'm just human. There's a commonality that we can kind of do that. Now, how do I take care of myself? And I have to believe and hope that some of the, like, wouldn't it have been nice had you had someone that had helped give you the kind of compassion in the moment? Like that teacher was bunk for saying that. And I'm glad for all the achievements that have come about, but, would there have been a softer way for me to lean into my achievement without having that whole piece?
I remember when I was in my pre-K classroom and I had, these adorable 4-year-olds, my 4-year-old superstars running around doing their thing. And we started talking about, well, like how should Miss Ilana address this? Like if people are, hitting each other or saying unkind words, like what should I do? Right. Or what should all of us do? And so we came up as a class with the idea of redo. So my kids would come up to me and be like, ah! I'd be like, is this a moment for a redo? And they're like, mm-hmm. So they'd go to the peace corner, have a little, peace process conversation with their friend. And then they'd come back like, we solved our problem. And I was like, the power of redo is huge. It was like I just say the word redo. Whereas before I'd be so reactive. It's like it triggered me. And the dysregulation of the students would just like turn me into a dysregulated human. And then I'd be like, wah. And so the redo button, it's kind of like you talked about it with your kids in the cognitive form, like redoing a paper. But I'm talking about it like somatically, emotionally. That's where socially, that's where it showed up the most meaningfully, I would say, because people got to make different choices about their bodies, about their emotional expression, about how they showed up for their friends. And it was so incredible to see the transformation. And they started owning the redo for themselves. I didn't have to do it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, and when I modeled that, they just started doing it. And it's just so incredible. And those skills in school are so important. Why are we teaching that? That's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
I feel like the topic that we're maybe talking around, but that feels so core to this is resilience. You can talk about that in different language. Grit, perseverance, growth mindset, we've mentioned a few times. And I feel like that skill, when we think about cognitive intelligence and how it's shifting and transforming in a time of AI in particular, like resilience is going to be a cognitive intelligence strength that's really, really important. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about resilience. And one thing that maybe I want to like double click on around resilience is we live in this society now where people are just swiping, swiping, swiping. Attention deficit disorders everywhere, right? People's attention is just constantly moving. And to me, resilience it's harder and harder to come by. And yet I feel that it is more important than ever.
Uh-huh.
And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about resilience in this new context that we find ourselves in.
Sure. I mean, I think when I think about resilience, I'll kind of go back to somewhat of like the science and the ways in which I think the science has been really helpful and also problematic. An initial notion of resilience in the early parts of the research talked about resilience as if it was impermeability. It was as if it was a shield that stopped you from getting hurt. That definition really kind of permeated. So that's where we heard things like high intelligence is part of resilience. Relatedness is part of resilience. But it was as if it was a shield that stopped you from getting hurt. And unfortunately, that definition really kind of kept on going and really entered into the parenting zeitgeist. And the parenting that actually moved for 1,000 different reasons within the United States to more protective shield, more helicopter, more blanket, more stopping bad things from happening, which I want to connect with the, impulse around protecting our kids, but we've got lots of information that hasn't helped, right? The idea. I actually think that was based on a flawed notion of what resilience really is. And another way for us to think about resilience is not to stop from getting hurt, but bounce back, to actually go all the way down to the bottom, to hit rock bottom, to get uncomfortable, to be hurt, and then to recover. That definition means also that our parenting and education would look different. And so I think grit kind of got in there for a little bit. There was an attempt to kind of think about perseverance and grit. However, grit kind of got, in my opinion, got kind of picked up and weaponized around kids that were really in extraordinarily difficult circumstances and kind of got moved to be like, it's okay. You can just be gritty. We missed it. We missed it. I don't think that was anybody's. I don't think that was Duckworth's intention. I don't think that was but we kind of missed it. And there's a middle ground, I think, which is that um, we can be able to support our kids in the bounce back, right? And the develop and not have our whole entire parenting or education system be only about protection. It has to be about protection at some level, but in my opinion, we've overemphasized protection and de-emphasized preparation. And so part of the swiping is about managing discomfort. It's okay to be bored.
Yes, it is.
And then at the same time, it's okay. Then I have to be in a culture that supports me as a parent with having a kid that's bored. We don't have that.
Totally. And one of my absolute best friends in the world is a psychiatrist. And I'm looking at all the TKs and kindergarten schools in San Francisco. It's like a whole situation, like touring 30 schools, literally. And in a lot of these schools, I'm like, is Aaliyah just going to be so bored? And I'm like really concerned about that. Like Sam, I talk to Sam about this all the time. She's just brilliant. I'm like, I can't have her just be bored. And my best friend's like, that's like the best skill ever, is helping her sit in the boredom, because that's where creativity and curiosity come from. And that like brings us back to curiosity. It's like, are we creating actual space for the curiosity to surface? Because if it's like constant, this, learning, doing all these things, then where is there room to ask questions?
Well, you're also talking about, I really appreciate the speaking about this, like the pressures on the parent. Like depends where you live, where you are, where your culture, all that. But we certainly all know that there are spaces where it doesn't feel like you could possibly find the right space for your child. It's too expensive. It requires too much on the parent. It also has a culture that is really like the expectation is, oh no, we never let our child do X. Okay. And it's also the pressure around, and if you get this wrong, you've failed as a parent. So we've got a whole system that commodifies that fear.
Yeah.
And even, I remember going to buy, when my son was born, buy his car seat, right? And so I was like, how come car seats cost this so much? And this is 17 years ago, right? So how much they cost so much? And I remember the guy saying, you could either go with this one, or if you really love your child, you can get this one.
Oh.
And we have a system of educational choices that do that to us as parents all the time, and don't allow us to really be in community. And it actually tells us with certainty, with cynicism, if you don't do this, you have failed as a parent and you failed your child. And I think that kind of goes back to, that has not led us to a place of believing that our children can have mistakes, right? And and we also know not every kid can have the same mistakes, right? There are some kids that make a mistake and that puts them on a pathway to prison. There's some kids that have certain mistakes and that puts them on a pathway to resist. So we know that those things are different, but I think that there's been a parenting zeitgeist that has overcorrected. There's been an educational zeitgeist that has overcorrected. We have punished teachers for not meeting particular outcome. And then that means that we have left out the opportunities to get all these other intelligences, to have opportunity for kids to make mistakes, to have the variability in how kids learn. We also have a system where, like, if you make a mistake online, that mistake is forever. So there's all of these kinds of pieces that, by the way, I'm speaking in hyperbole, that there are certainly places that we, thankfully Miss December is teaching my kids, you can make mistakes. Thankfully, there's other kinds of spaces that are allowing them to rewrite the paper. There's other kind of, options that I think we can put our attention on that will help us to kind of cultivate this resilience, because it is about practice, about giving our kids practice at managing the hard things. And also trusting and holding high expectations that they can. Because that's the other thing that actually Jamil Zaki talks about as well, is that what we've done is we have a cynicism about our parenting and a cynicism about our kids, which means that we've lowered our expectations. We've lowered the expectations about their capacity to be bored or their capacity. I'm a trauma therapist. I work with children who experience trauma, which means that I think I've had this unique and blessed opportunity to really believe in and hold expectations that kids can manage and be healthy and move through so much. I don't want the kids to experience the things that my clients have experienced. And I know that resilience is a possibility.
And just to loop this, right? Like what we're talking about, the way I'm hearing it is cynicism has so much to do with a fixed mindset. Just like, well, in Ilana's case, well, she's not cognitively smart enough to be in the higher math class. Right? What a BS thing to say, right? And if you were to show up with more curiosity and believe in a child's ability to be resilient, to be perseverant, right? To ultimately achieve, like, what does that open? What does that open up?
I think so much, Sam, you and I have the honor and privilege of leading our trainings and our master's program for thousands of educators every year, and just seeing these incredible educators, many of you who are listening, like model what we're talking about, not the fixed mindset, but what is possible when you actually see your students, you honor who they are, you check in with them, you're literally interested in what they care about, what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, and you're like teaching from that place of responsiveness. It's so inspiring. It makes me literally cry every time I hear more of your stories. And so we know that y'all are doing this work, and it's a lifelong practice. It is hard to show up every single day and just be like, I'm open and curious and resilient today. And then so you'll get slashed with another thing, right? Another mental health crisis is showing up, or, a kid comes in, hasn't eaten for 24 hours, and all of a sudden you're wondering why they're dysregulated. And so I'm wondering, Allison, from your perspective, like, what advice do you have for educators who are really interested in, like, how do I go from where I am now, and that's in a lot of different places for all of us, to like taking those next practical steps that will allow me to be more resilient, to have more of a sustainable approach to teaching, to like be able to show up with more curiosity? What would you suggest?
I'm always a big fan of, like, first of all, the awareness part. Like, if you're at a point of being aware of, like, I'm feeling cynical all the time and burnout, then that is a place of, like, at least So start there.
It's a win.
Yeah, it's a win. Or maybe take some time to kind of reflect. How am I doing? Am I operating within alignment with what I want? Like, is this the teacher that I want to be? Those are hard questions, right? Sometimes if you can't figure out yourself, then ask your family. Family will tell you, are you okay? Or I notice I had a job that was really, really tough for a long time. I thought I was doing well. And my daughter, who was 4 at the time, said, when I grow up, Mama, I want to wear high heels, red lipstick, and yell. It's like, oh, hmm. Right. So she was hearing something. So sometimes it's hard. So step 1, come into some awareness. Number 2, I would do an inventory of what is working. Is it a gratitude inventory? Here are the things I'm grateful for. Here are the things that I feel that I have some joy in. Here are the things. You got to start there. And I think we have to keep on putting our attention there. And even if it's a short list, it's a list. So I would start, awareness, and I would start with cataloging, paying attention to, moving our attention to what is working, feeding that. And then the third is to get curious, wonder, what could I change? What could be possible? And when you get to the place, well, I could never do that, or the system would never allow me, let's get curious. Maybe there's another place. Maybe there's another resource. Maybe there's another way to advocate. Maybe not that door, then what else? So those kind of 3 kind of pieces of what I would kind of encourage, and just knowing, like, let me ask a bunch of questions. Also, if you could do this in relationship with some other, like, homies and friends and other folks, that's always helpful. This is like, can we be in a place of paying attention to our gratitude, what we're grateful for? Um, And that's not to get rid of or ignore the other stuff. It's actually the magic that will get us through, and help us to attend more fully to it.
In our trainings and programs, we always say gratitude forces us to focus on the things that are working, which there's so many things that aren't working. And that's the cynicism. Just go straight there. That's where our mind wants to go. But when we engage in these gratitude practices, and Sam and I literally teach hundreds in our programs, it's amazing. And I've gotten now so into it that every single day with my daughter, we start our morning with, what's your intention for the day? How do you want to show up? And she gets to choose, 1, 2, or 3 words. And this week, she's had the exact same words every day. She goes, Mommy, and she's 4. My intention is to be joyful, fearless, and present.
Amazing.
I'm like, I love you. This is the best. I was like, that's my intention too. Like, can I borrow that?
Yes.
And then before we go to bed every night, she's laying down, I'm scratching her back, doing our things. And we say, what are 3 things that we're grateful for from our day? And she'll reflect on. A lot of times it'll be like, Mommy, I'm grateful that when I fell, I got up and I was fearless. She'll connect it back to her intentions. Or I'm grateful for the time we just spent together.
Yep.
And so this stuff works not just for us as adults, but for any age. Like, I'm doing it with my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old. And so, when we weave these kinds of powerful practices into our school settings, it's not just the students we're impacting, but they go home and then they're like, Mommy, I'm grateful for this. Or and it has powerful ripple effects on whole communities.
Yeah. And it's contagious, right? And it's a type of thing that also we have to imagine too, as much as we were talking about kind of co-regulation, we often and correctly think about co-regulation as being just from the adult to the kid. But how many times have you been co-regulated by the kid you've been with, right? How many times did that kid turn to you and like, take a breath or, say something silly? So to leave open that option that when they generate the kind of opportunities for kind of gratitude, how moving that is for us. How many of us have been moved when a kid says something like, thank you, right? So we don't want to put it on them as if that's their obligation, but we should leave up enough space for us to be able to receive it. And if we have classrooms and spaces that kind of cultivate it, I'm sure all your educators can come up with ideas about like the ways in which that little kid said a thing that lit you up or made everything okay, or giggled at you at the right time, or thought you were funny. All of that kind of stuff is to be able to receive that is a big help.
I wonder, Allison, as we move towards wrap here, like we're living in a weird time in America, right? That's maybe the awareness, the first step of what you shared, right? And a lot of our educators, a lot of our students are just navigating challenges that they've never navigated before, right? I have a close friend here, a green card holder, who doesn't want to speak Portuguese with his son,
Yeah.
right, in a grocery store because he's afraid he's going to be picked off the street, right? Like that's the fear that some people are living with right now in this country. And I'm curious, like you gave us a framework, right, a 3-step framework. Like, what is there anything else that you want to say around like current reality in America, current reality for educators and students? Like, and how do we apply this, and how do we really take this to students and educators who are facing these challenges day in, day out right now?
I would rely upon the same kind of premises, right? So one level is awareness. So just to be like, am I feeling kind of heavy in the world because the world is heavy around me? There's that. But also this kind of inventory kind of piece, the kind of gratitude. It's not to say only to have a focus on the gratitude for where we are in our nation. That might feel hard and unavailable for folks. But it's about these stories of resilience. A lot of this, in my opinion, America has had lots of stories of brutality. This is not the first time that we have been brutal and unkind to each other. And we also have so many stories of our resilience,
Yeah.
of our love, of our standing up for each other. So this is a great time to remind of ourselves of that, to look for the helpers, to look for those stories, to find them. Maybe that's not just within the history, but it's our own history. When have I been through something that made me reminds me of this, or my people? Because we're only 1 to 2 generations away from some incredible story of having to overcome brutality. So that inventory is like, where do I remember? Like, was it my grandfather that did this, or my immigrant family that did this. We really have to root ourselves in that, and also to fight the system that is organized around us being cynical. We have a system. We have overwhelmed with all of the bad stories and all of the news, because what that does is if we are cynical, then we don't move into action. And that I feel like is a good place of kind of like, ooh, the more cynical, the more assured I am and how terrible the outcome is, the less I'm likely to act, which just means that other people win. So I think we have this opportunity, like what can we do in this moment is to fight this kind of cynicism with curiosity, maybe curiosity about like, who in my family has lived through a hard thing? It's not going to take you long to figure that out. How did they do it? How can we do it? None of us would be here. In any of our kind of stories, I'm sure none of us would be here but for the resilience, capacity, and storytelling of somebody else in our family. So let's find it. Let's pay attention to it.
Amen.
Yeah.
What a powerful question to ask ourselves in a moment where we just feel disempowered. What a powerful question. It's like, how have people gotten through things like this before?
And remember, the cynical answer is it's never been like this before. Okay, there's some new stuff. The cynical kind of piece is that it seems as if we're smarter if we predict bad. If this is the end, I think about it this way. All of us within our family have lived through the apocalypse before. There's somebody in our family that thought this is the end. And for many folks, it was the end, but we're still here. So I get a little oppositional. Fight the cynicism. The cynicism is a guarantee that the outcome will happen. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy because it disempowers us from looking to what is possible and to doing even one small action. And that action can be a breath. Right? A breath, it can be a connection. So I think that's also the opportunity that your educators really have is to lift up those kind of stories. And that goes back to, Sam, and I think the piece around like, we should be telling those stories of resilience to our students.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
Been through a thing.
Yeah.
And we all have. And even they all have too.
Yeah.
Allison, this has just been extraordinary. I was like, can we just continue this for a few weeks and just every hour of being awake, have this conversation? I'm taking away so many inspiring just nuggets that are like, okay, that new shift in mindset or that question I want to ask, or maybe a shift towards like negativity, towards openness or curiosity. And I'm really excited for myself and for everyone who's listening to walk away with the gems that you've left us with. So thank you so much for, one, taking the time to have this incredible conversation. But then two, I know Sam and I feel so lucky that you're helping us develop out our human intelligence framework and our master's degree curriculum, and feel so blessed that millions of educators are going to have access to this because of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your work and opening up the space for educators and people who love kids to get some support. You all are doing an amazing job, and I really just appreciate what you've provided here.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.